Okay, I'm going to take you guys on a tour today like you haven't been on before. This is a tour of corruption in the Tennessee government, looking at every branch, from the judiciary to the legislature, and then on to the executive branch. So I'm standing here in front of Sumner County Courthouse, where presiding Judge Thompson sits over civil cases here in this court. This judge is more concerned about how much money attorneys are getting paid than he is dispensing justice. And he routinely violates litigants' right to be heard. He bullies and harasses self-represented litigants on a very routine basis. And that denying due process it's actually a federal crime to oppress a person's rights like that. He conspires with attorneys, sometimes even against their own clients. I remember, I think it was back in 2014, he put up a sign on the courthouse here. Had never been here before. It was never necessary in this courthouse before that no video recording or cell phones are allowed. And it's because they want to, judges like Thompson want to operate in the dark, and they don't want anybody to have any evidence of how they bully and harass litigants in this courthouse. So from here, we're going to head down to Davidson and take a look at some judges down there, and how this corruption and what we're seeing in the judiciary is perpetuated, actually coming from the legislative branch. So let's head on down to Davidson County. All right, so we're here in front of the Davidson County courthouse here. And before I talk about some of the stuff that goes on in here, you know, this corruption that's happening in courtrooms across the state is because the legislative houses have surrendered their power to oversee judges, to impeach judges and remove judges. Our legislative houses have surrendered that power, creating the Board of Judicial Conduct. You know, in 1821, our third governor, William Carroll, he said the character of a state is so reflected in its judiciary, it requires the attention of the houses, the constant attention of the houses at all times. But our senators and our representatives, they ignore, and we even have like Senator Mike Bell, that he perpetuates these judges in the Board of Judicial Conduct. And they are holding expressly prohibited offices. Those judges in the Board of Judicial Conduct, they're holding a prohibited office. Article 6, Section 7, Tennessee Constitution, no judge shall hold any other office of trust or profit under this state or the United States. It's an unlawful alteration of our form of government. Well, let's talk about what happens in Davidson County here, downtown Nashville. We have like Judge Amanda McClendon. She literally throws her weight around outside the courtroom, you know, protecting one of her staff members having a run-in with a city official. I don't know, it's like a water line or gas line, something stupid. She had to go apologize. She's like, "I'm a judge, leave my employee alone." Ridiculous stuff. But Judge Amanda McClendon, she made false conclusions of law. She falsely applied the law to protect corrupt attorneys. I mean, literally. That's the kind of stuff that's happening in our courthouses. And, you know, these judges and attorneys are essentially, they're above the law. They can do anything that they want, and this has got to stop. And we've also got Chancellor Moskal in here presiding over the Chancery Court. And she, like, literally had falsified evidence presented to her court by a Deputy Attorney General. That's a crime. Falsification of a legal document tendered in there. And Chancellor Moskal did nothing. So this kind of stuff that's happening, it is destroying, it's tearing at the fabric of our country, but it's an incredible problem here in Tennessee. So, and this problem, we're going to go down to the legislative branch, and we're going to take a look at it. But first, let's head on down to Williamson County and talk about what's happening down there. Okay, so now we're down in Williamson County at their Chancery and Circuit Court down here. And what's happening in this courthouse, there's no better example. The purpose of our judiciary and legal system is of course supposed to be to dispense justice. But what it's transformed into is a monopoly, and it's about maximizing as much attorney revenue as possible. And I've witnessed it in this courthouse with Judge Woodruff. I mean, literally extorting, conspiring with attorneys and extorting litigants under color of law. And literally just taking jurisdiction where he has no jurisdiction in order to extort under color of law. Judges like this are tearing at the fabric of our people, and we have got to restore accountability. And none of this can happen except for the failure of our legislative houses and our representatives and senators who just will not exercise their power to provide judicial oversight or accountability of any kind whatsoever. So next step, we're going to head over to the legislative office buildings and start taking a look at how all of this corruption that's happening in the judiciary, how does that all happen? And how is it perpetuated by the legislative houses? So let's head downtown, back downtown to Nashville to the legislative houses. So all of that corruption that we talked about that's going on in the lower courts, it couldn't happen except that it can get through the Tennessee Court of Appeals and the Tennessee Supreme Court, because they should be checking, you know, those denials of due process and false applications of law. But here's the first thing they do that happens inside of this courthouse is they send out a litigation tax invoice. And I'm looking at one from my case. It's $13.75 for litigation tax. Now that seems pretty innocuous, right? But get this, down at the bottom of this invoice it says, failure to pay the litigation tax within 7 days from the date of this invoice will subject your appeal to dismissal. Wait a minute. We just spent tens, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars litigating in the trial court. And then what? These guys are going to dismiss it on a litigation tax of $13.75, not paid in 7 days. It is a total scam that the Court of Appeals needs their money in 7 days. It used to be 14 days a couple years ago when I was in here. Now it's 7 days, so apparently they need their money even faster. So this is just one example of how the appellate courts deny justice and deny access to the court by dismissing a case on $13.75. It's absolutely ridiculous. So let's go take a look over at the legislative houses and see how that corruption in government perpetuates and comes from what's going on in the legislative houses. Let's go over there right now. Okay, so now we're in front of, this is the Cordell Hull Legislative Office building here. And so they've got offices for all 98 representatives and for the 32 senators and hearing rooms. I'm going to give you guys a tour of everything and all the corruption that goes on in there. And then after that, we're going to end up across the street over here. If I pan the camera up here is the Tennessee Capitol building. So we're going to go on the floor and take a look in there when we end up. But first, let's go inside Cordell Hull building. And I'm going to show you where all this corruption takes place and how it takes place in here. So I'm going to go through security, and once we get on the other side of security, then I'll catch up with you guys there. All right, so come on. Okay, so we just went through security and we came down one level and we're on the main floor of Cordell Hull office building. And over here on this side, you can see this is the Senate side of the building. And you can see they've got Senate Hearing Room 1 and Hearing Room 2. Now, what's important about this is hearing rooms. Hearing rooms, they have hearings. These are actually courts of justice in our legislative houses, and we've forgotten that. So we're going to follow me over onto this side, and then we're going to look in the House hearing room. And you guys have, if you've been following my work for a couple of years, you've seen me testifying, you know, for and against. I mostly testify against legislation, but it's inside these hearing rooms. I think they're probably locked because they're out of session. But yeah, everything's locked up right now because they're out of session. But they've got 3 or 4 hearing rooms where the House meets, and then they debate legislation that goes on down here. But here's what really happens with these so-called debates or discussions about new legislation, is they read the caption of the bill, and the legislators, almost none of them know what's actually in the bill. The bill itself is written by legislative attorneys. Every single bill is written by a legislative attorney. They're not written by the members of the House or the Senate, or at least none that I know of. It's all by legislative attorneys. And all of the legislation is coming from special interest groups, and it's all for corrupt purpose. These halls are literally teeming with lobbyists and special interest groups looking to seek favor. And when somebody's getting favor, somebody's getting pushed down. There's always another side to this. The worst part of it, though, is that much of this legislation is repugnant to the Tennessee Constitution. I think it's Tennessee Constitution Article 11, Section 8, explicitly prohibits special interest legislation. But our senators and our representatives have forgotten and they no longer understand what's in our Constitution anymore. And so they just routinely violate it. So we're going to go hop on the elevator. So let's go take a look up in the legislative offices upstairs. Let's go. Okay, so I'm on the 5th floor in Courthouse Hall building, and these are the legislative offices. And if we walk down, like, this is Representative Travis's office. This is Subcommittee Chairman Boyd's office. There's some conference rooms around here. But this place, literally, January through May, when this place is in session, especially January, February, March, this place is literally teeming with special interests and lobbyists that are going to these members saying, we want this new legislation, or we want you to tweak this legislation a little bit. And here's how profound this is. They propose about 1,500 bills every legislative session. 1,500 new pieces of legislation are proposed almost every year. When you count up that each member can propose 5 bills, and then chairmen or committee chairs can do like another 9 bills. When you add that up with all the members, it's about 1,500. And they literally pass about 900 pieces of legislation. We are getting buried in this stuff, and I'm telling you, every one of these bills that's going through here, with that much legislation, they have like 10, 15 minutes. I mean, literally, that's how much time that they have to deliberate on these things overall. These guys are passing out they're passing legislation like a short order cook, shelling out pancakes. I mean, it's really that bad. So this is where, I mean, you'll literally see this place, just lobbyists up and down. They're all making deals with legislators, trying to get their own little thing passed out here. And nobody understands this whole legislative process and all of the corruption that's going through here except for me. And there's nobody talking about it. Nobody knows how to fight it like I do. When we look at other things that are happening in here, and some of the chairmen, they'll have a pre-bill hearing before they go down into those hearing rooms and discuss the legislation. They'll be like, yeah, here's what we're going to talk about. And they all get together and huddle in, before they do it in public. All of the, these little closed door proceedings that are going on. And all of this stuff is literally, it continues to weaken and oppress our constitutionally protected rights, or they're supposed to be protected rights. So next step, we're going to head over to the Capitol building. We're going to go over to the House and Senate floor, and I'll show you what that looks like. And then we're going to stop by the governor's office over there as well. So let's head on over to the Capitol building now. It's just kind of cool. So this is the Courthouse Hall tunnel. So we're just leaving the Courthouse Hall legislative office building, and then we're heading over to the Capitol. And they built this several years ago. It's actually a beautiful, beautiful facility, tunnel between the Capitol building and the legislative office building. The air down here is very well purified and clean down here. Just kind of an impressive thought. Probably a good thing our tax dollars paid for looking at the Courthouse Hall tunnel. So. All right, so now I'm over in the Capitol building. This is the Senate chamber, beautiful, beautiful facility. But this is where the Senate debates the bills. Typically, they'll go through a subcommittee, and then they'll go through a committee, and then once they're heard 3 times, then they'll come on the floor, and then they'll vote for them, here in the Senate. And then let's take a walk across the hall. Okay, and so walking in, this is the House chamber. Where the House will vote on these bills. So you can see it's got 98. Looks like Clerk Hicks is back in the background there. And then come around here. This is Chief Clerk of the Senate here, and Chief Clerk Humphreys, who told me reading doesn't mean reading when it comes to petitions. And he just told a member of the House that the Tennessee Constitution is correct on the General Assembly's website, when we all know it's not. The last phrase of Article 1, Section 23 has been unlawfully altered. And we heard Representative Hicks that we just saw, when he read my last petition, I think he probably did it on purpose, and he said by address of remonstrance, when the letter from Representative Garrett said clearly by address or remonstrance, because that's what's in the Constitution. And I think these guys are just being sniffy about it. But it's happening because the chief clerk of the Senate, he's the one that's responsible for that Tennessee Constitution, that fraudulent version of the Tennessee Constitution that's on the General Assembly's website. So now let's take a walk downstairs, and I'm going to show you the governor's office, because everything that's happening on the floors of these houses and everything that's happening in the legislative office building over in Cordell Hall that we talked about, all of that legislation that's repugnant to the Constitution, it can't get through except going through the governor's office, the last step. So let's go down and take a look down there. Okay, so now I'm standing in front of the Secretary of State office, and they've got here, you can come take a Tennessee Blue Book. Last year's edition was blue. This year's is yellow, and they know, because it went to the Secretary of State, that I wanted to see the actual original Tennessee Constitution when we first started debating that the Constitution's been unlawfully altered, and they came out with a second edition that has the false language in the last phrase of Article 1, Section 23. So it doesn't seem like it's a typographical error. It seems intentional by government that they're putting out a false version of the Tennessee Constitution that strips us of the right. So let's go walk down here. We're going to go just down the hall is the governor's office. Now I talked about, all that legislation that comes from, the House and the Senate that gets approved over there. All of that legislation, it either gets signed by the governor, or if it's not objected to by him within 10 days, and even if he doesn't sign, it still becomes law. So even if he doesn't sign it, his inaction will result in that legislation still becoming law. So this is the governor's office here. And the first thing that I would do is take down this stupid petition that separates the public, from going into the governor's office. I think it's ridiculous. My office will always be open for citizens, and I'll probably have a day to address petitions from the people and just go sit over in one of the conference rooms here and just have people, if you want to come and petition me or seek redress from the office of governor, I would welcome that. It's a constitutional right that the people have. But all of this legislation that is corrupt, that is all special interest, that is repugnant to the Tennessee Constitution, that allows all of that corruption that's going on in our courts, that's doing things like creating the unconstitutional Board of Judicial Conduct. All that bad stuff is because of legislation that goes to the governor's office. And he either signs it or he fails to object to it. And so this is where it all stops, and if I'm elected as governor, I guarantee you that any legislation that comes to my desk that is repugnant to the Tennessee Constitution, I will state in writing to the House and the Senate why I won't sign it, and then I will address the public as to why I believe that it's repugnant to the Tennessee Constitution. And that's what we need, is a governor that's standing up for the people. So just to sum up, we walk through all the corruption that's going on in the courts across this state. We've gone that can't happen except for the corruption that's going on in the Tennessee Court of Appeals and Tennessee Supreme Court. And all of that corruption is because of what's enacted over and discussed in the Cordell Hall Legislative Office Building, all the special interests, all the lobbyists that are going through there. Like, it's so crazy, all the legislation that they do. And then it coming over here after it's passed, downstairs on the House and Senate floor chambers. After it's passed, it comes right here to the governor's office, and then it gets enacted into statutory law. And I'll stop all that. So thank you guys for taking this tour of our corrupt Tennessee government today. Thanks for taking this tour with me. And I hope you'll take a look at all of my work, restoring the right of remonstrance, taking stand against rampant corruption in government. So thank you for taking time. God bless, Godspeed to us all, and God we trust.